the Corcoran Center for Real Estate and Urban Action. We've got a great speaker today in Jonathan Rose, but before we start, I just wanted to say a couple thank yous. Special thanks to Taylor Perkins, for the Assistant Director of the Center, for pulling this together. Our student workers for the Center work every day to make the Center programming work and to make the curriculum happen, and so we're very grateful to all of our students. The Corcoran Center has three primary goals. One is to develop and lead a new curriculum at Boston College around real estate and neighborhood revitalization. Secondly, we run an internship which runs every summer, and we place 20 students around the city in positions that what we say are at the intersection of real estate and urban action. And these are positions with the Boston Planning and Development Agency, the Department of Neighborhood Development, the Housing and Finance Agency for the state of Massachusetts. And they're all opportunities for students to engage in experiential learning opportunities that we hope will lead students in a path to continue their work in this field after college. The third program is a speaking series, which brings guests like Jonathan to campus, and hopefully those speakers are people that, again, introduce this world of both real estate as well as the world of urban action to our undergraduate students. The fourth thing that we're doing is now a new initiative called the Mattapan Initiative. And what we're trying to do is open up a new connection between Boston College and the neighborhood of Mattapan. Now, Mattapan is a neighborhood in the city of Boston which has tremendous strengths, and it's developing quickly with newfound community-based organizations that are continually strengthening, but there are a lot of challenges in this neighborhood. And most of those challenges are connected back to a lot of the themes that are talked about in the well-tempered city. And there are a lot around access to opportunity. And so what we're hoping we can do over the coming years is, through connections to Boston College, develop at least some more pathways, more access to opportunity for that neighborhood, and simultaneously create pedagogically important experiential learning opportunities for our students. So that's really what the Corcoran Center is doing now. But before we introduce Mr. Rose, I'd just like to also say we're going to have Michael Lane, one of our students, introduce Mr. Rose. Mike Lane is a student at the Carroll School. He's taken all of the real estate classes that are offered here. He's had a couple of great internships, and he's made incredible contributions to the founding and start of the center. So please welcome Michael Lane.
Thank you, Neil, and thank you everyone for coming out this evening. It's my pleasure to introduce and welcome Jonathan Rose here to BC today. Mr. Rose is a real estate developer who specializes in working with cities and nonprofits to plan and build sustainable, socially responsible, and affordable housing. His grandfather and great-uncle founded Rose Associates in the late 1920s and developed workforce housing in the Bronx and Manhattan. The company has been passed down through the generations and now manages over 31,000 apartments in New York City. Jonathan graduated from Yale University with a BA in Psychology and Philosophy and received a Master's in Regional Planning from the University of Pennsylvania. In 1989, he founded the Jonathan Rose Companies, a real estate firm that leverages Jonathan's multidisciplinary background to create more resilient 21st century cities. The firm's innovative work has won numerous awards from organizations such as the Urban Land Institute and the National Trust for Historic Preservation. Mr. Rose's book, The Well-Tempered City: What Modern Science, Ancient Civilizations, and Human Behavior Teach Us About the Future of Urban Life, was published in 2016 and won the 2017 Prose Award for Outstanding Scholarly Work by a trade publisher. Mr. Rose is an expert in his field and has testified before the U.S. Senate and Housing Committees on housing, infrastructure, and environmental issues. and has served as an advisor to the White House Office of Urban Affairs. He chaired the MTA's Blue Ribbon Sustainability Commission and was appointed by Governor Cuomo as a commissioner for his NYS 2100 Commission, tasked with identifying strategies for the long-term resilience of New York State's infrastructure post-Hurricane Sandy. Mr. Rose is also involved with a number of philanthropic organizations. He is a trustee of Enterprise Community Partners and the Brooklyn Academy of Music. He founded the Garrison Institute with his wife Diana to relieve suffering in the fields of trauma, education, and the environment. His work in sustainability, socially minded development, and affordable housing is in direct tandems with the values expressed by the Corcoran Center. We hope that Mr. Rose's talk will further the Center's mission of encouraging students to think across disciplines and to combine the academic exploration of real estate with real-world problem solving. We are thrilled to host him at BC, so please join me in welcoming to the stage Mr. Jonathan Rose.
Thank you all for coming. So first, can you hear me? Okay. So as I talk, my voice tone may go down. So if you need me to go louder, just go like louder or go louder or something like that. And actually, maybe what I'll do is stand here, and I may even pace forwards and backwards, and so that you can really hear me. So my goal is to talk for not too long. I probably will talk for too long, and then to get to questions so we can really have a dialogue. So, first of all, why did I write a book about cities? And the reason is because it struck me that cities are the places where we can most likely make. So, by the way, I am a social and environmental change activist, and I use my real estate business actually as a force for good. And I come out of a whole thing called social venture work, and I deeply believe that business can be not only as a force for good, but in this time in which we have a federal government which in many ways I think is stepping back from its responsibility to be a positive contributor, that there's much that business can do. So I actually want to learn more about you. How many of you are involved in the Corcoran Center? Oh, fantastic. And how many of you are business students? And how many of you, I was trying to figure out how many of you are not business students. So what are the other things? Just shout out, what are some of the other things? So what are you doing?
Sociology.
Great.
History.
Yeah.
International studies.
Yeah.
Political science.
Yeah. Great. Okay. Yes?
Chemistry.
All right. Chemistry. At any rate, I really believe that business can be a force for good. But when I look at, so my whole mission, by the way, is how do we make the world a better place? And one of the goals of writing the book was to wrestle with the role of cities in this activity, which, by the way, is never solved. It's an ever perpetual thing that one has to do. So what's interesting is that we exist in a time in which it's very difficult to get nations to move. We're seeing how divided America is, and we're seeing how divided France is, and England is, and more of the world we're finding is divided, and the politics of nations are becoming, I was going to use the word just demonstrative, I'm not sure it's the right word, but a lot of posturing. Mayors of cities actually are being held accountable, and it doesn't matter whether you're Democrat or Republican or independent or whatever, the mayors and city councils are very much held accountable to deliver results for their residents. If the education system is not good, if the snow doesn't get cleaned up, etc., the garbage is laying around, it doesn't matter what your political party is, you're out. And what we're seeing, therefore, is that cities are doing, I think, a much better job of, as a political unit, of delivering results. They're also in what I call co-opetition. So cities around the world are both competing with each other for bringing in businesses, jobs, economic opportunity, etc., but they're also collaborating amazingly well. There are all these networks, both in the United States and globally, so that, for example, there's something called C40, in which cities are exchanging ideas and best practices on how to deal with climate change. So we're seeing cities, they're much better. They're both laboratories of innovation, and they're exchange agents, and they're exchanging ideas much better. And the bottom line is that I'm seeing that cities are a place where if you really want to see positive change and solutions to many of our environmental and social issues of our time, that cities are places where I'm seeing that's most likely to happen, which is one of the reasons why I focused on cities. The issue with cities that I'm seeing is a lack of vision. This is actually an issue with nations, it's an issue with organizations in general. We do not have a vision that is equal to the problems of our times. So let's talk about the problems of the time just very briefly. The world is rapidly urbanizing. This is another reason why cities matter, because by 2080, 80% of the world's population will live in cities. The population is growing to 10 billion people. Income inequality is rising. The environment is being destroyed. We're over-consuming. We're also, climate is changing. We're seeing loss of droughts in many areas and floods in other areas. There's an enormous amount of volatility in disruption that actually I don't see, except in a few places like Singapore. Most of Western civilization, or most of civilization, urban civilization, is not prepared for the challenges that are ahead. If you look at any city plan and you really hold it up to some of the issues, I'm going to describe some of the issues, there's a mismatch. So number one thing I see that I hear in almost every city that I go to is there's not enough affordable housing. In America today, there are 20 million American families that spend more than 50% of their income on housing. By the way, there is more suburban poverty than urban poverty. And so very often they are having to live in locations where they are driving, and if there's two people in the family who are working, two people have to drive to get to and from work. They're spending 20-30% of their income on transportation. In LA, there's a certain percentage of families that literally are spending a combined housing, transportation of 96% of their income. I don't know how they eat. This is one of the reasons why low-income people have bad debt, because the salaries they're being paid, the wages are too low, the housing costs are too high, the fuel costs and car costs are too high, and the numbers simply do not add up. Affordable housing is designed as housing that can, in which somebody pays 30% of their income for the housing. So when you move from people spending 50% of their income to housing to 30% of their income on housing, they have significantly better outcomes. They are healthier. Their children do better in school. They have more family, less divorce, more family stability. You see all kinds of benefits that come from affordable housing. At any rate, take it for granted, in much of America, there's an affordable housing crisis. There's not enough. And many, many cities are doing wonderful things, but insufficient things to develop enough affordable housing. So for example, in Los Angeles, when I was there, the city passed, not because I was there, but I happened to be there around election time, and the city passed a bond issue to invest $1.2 billion to build 10,000 units over 10 years of supportive housing for homeless families. 76% of the voters voted for this, a really generous, wonderful thing to do. Except they have 47,000 homeless people today. And if you look at the projections, by the time the 10 years are up, if you look at what wage growth is versus housing rent growth, they're projected to have 150,000 homeless people by the end of the 10th year. So building 10,000 units is good, but insufficient. The United States has a $3.4 billion infrastructure deficit. That means that our roads, bridges, airports, water systems, sewer systems, school systems, energy systems, just for deferred maintenance, just to get up to good standard, need $3.4 billion. This has nothing, this doesn't even add the imagination of the new systems that we need. I'll tell you a little bit about the new systems that we need. So, Donald Trump ran on a proposal to create $1 trillion infrastructure fund, which, by the way, he's reneging on, and he's going to play games with it, and it'll just be tax credits, and it really won't be. But even if it was $1 trillion, it's only a third of the problem to fix, less than a third of what we need to fix what we have, not even to imagine something new. So what I'm seeing is that we are approaching our, think about